Ireland's 2009 debt crisis, often described as a historic financial tsunami, unleashed a wave of economic disasters across Europe, affecting nations in ways that would reshape their financial landscapes for years to come. The crisis spared no one, and two countries in particular would stand out for their starkly contrasting experiences: Ireland and Greece. You see, Ireland, often referred to as the Celtic Tiger, had previously been celebrated for its dynamic economic growth, driven by a blend of technology and pharmaceuticals and financial services. But when the crisis hit, the country found itself grappling with a banking collapse of massive proportions. In fact, Ireland's banks were so deeply intertwined with international financial markets that the shock waves of the crisis reverberated through every corner of its economy. Meanwhile, Greece faced an entirely different set of challenges. As it turns out, the crisis exposed deep-seated structural issues within its economy, including an oversized public sector, rampant tax evasion, and a reliance on external borrowing that had masked underlying fiscal weaknesses. And as you'll later find out, Greece's situation was further complicated by a heavy reliance on tourism, a sector that was particularly vulnerable in a global economic downturn. To explain the dramatic shift in their economic trajectories, here are some mind-blowing details. In 2010, Ireland's GDP was approximately 179 billion euros, while Greece's GDP was around 226 billion euros. Fast forward to 2023, Ireland's GDP surged to an estimated 527 billion euros, while Greece's GDP reached only about 210 billion euros. But what went so dramatically wrong? This video is going to uncover exactly what happened for Ireland's economy to surge ahead of Greece's immediately after the 2009 debt catastrophe. Watch this video in full, because by the end of it, you'll have a clear understanding of the factors that fueled Ireland's fast recovery, the contrasting struggles faced by Greece, and the shocking details about the strategies that separated their past forever. But to truly understand how the financial landscape shifted so dramatically, we have to break down Ireland and Greece's economic states before the 2009 crisis hit. Now, in case you're wondering, Ireland was an economic marvel before the crisis hit. To draw a much clearer picture, its economy was fueled by foreign direct investment and a highly educated workforce. Key sectors such as information technology, pharmaceuticals, and financial services were booming. Multinational corporations flocked to Ireland, attracted by low corporate tax rates, strategic location, and business-friendly environment. Truth is that Ireland's success was built on a robust regulatory framework that facilitated huge business development. But how did Greece compare to this? Well, as most of you might already know, Greece's economic structure was fundamentally different. Greece had been grappling with chronic fiscal imbalances and a bloated public sector for years. The economy relied heavily on consumption and government spending, while structural inefficiencies hindered competitiveness. You see, the public sector was oversized, and tax evasion was rampant, which we'll come to later, severely hampered fiscal stability. In case you're not aware, Greece's heavy reliance on industries like tourism and shipping left it exposed to economic shocks without the diversification needed for resilience. To put things into perspective, Greece's economy was vulnerable to external disruptions, and its fiscal policies had long been unsustainable. Despite being part of the European Union, Greece faced challenges in implementing reforms that could modernize its economy and enhance competitiveness. In other words, Greece's economic model was ill-prepared for the global financial crisis that would soon engulf it, which begs the question, how did the 2009 debt crisis unleash a series of economic shocks that would change the destinies of Ireland and Greece forever? Let's get this straight. The 2009 debt crisis hit Ireland with devastating force, and its banking sector was at the eye of the storm. Ireland's economy, which had been growing rapidly, suddenly faced a severe contraction. GDP plummeted by 6.4% in 2009, and unemployment soared above 12%, leaving the nation in a state of economic turmoil. But wait, there's more. The Irish government issued a blanket guarantee for 6 major banks' liabilities, a move that looked to stabilize the financial system, but also exposed the state to significant risks. The government sought assistance from the IMF and the EU, securing a €67.5 billion bailout in 2010 to shore up its banking sector and restore confidence. Meanwhile, in Greece, the crisis exposed deep-rooted fiscal vulnerabilities that had been brewing for years. To put things into perspective, Greece's GDP contracted by 3.1% in 2009, and unemployment climbed above 10%. The government's fiscal deficit was over 15% of GDP, forcing Greece to implement austerity measures to stabilize its finances. And in case you needed more proof of this, Greece also turned to the IMF and the EU for financial support, securing a €110 billion bailout. But what would happen next would shock everyone. Despite these efforts, Greece struggled to regain stability, with social unrest and political challenges impeding progress. Greece's responses to the crisis was hindered by a lack of political consensus and a widespread public opposition to austerity measures. The government faced significant challenges in implementing the necessary reforms to address fiscal imbalances and restore economic growth. But on the other hand, Ireland's government quickly recapitalized banks and restored confidence in the financial system. The difference in their responses underscored the impact of governance and institutional capacity on economic recovery. But how did Ireland and Greece navigate the turbulent aftermath of the crisis all the way to recovery? Let me explain. The government of Ireland implemented austerity measures, reducing budget deficits through a combination of tax increases and spending cuts. But that's not all. Ireland's ability to attract foreign direct investment played a pivotal role in its recovery. The presence of multinational corporations at a low corporate tax rate drove economic growth and job creation, particularly in technology and pharmaceuticals. This strategic focus on high-value sectors allowed Ireland to regain its economic footing and rebuild investor confidence. Now, let's make this clear. The banking sector underwent significant reforms, with the government recapitalizing banks to restore solvency and confidence. By 2011, Ireland's GDP growth had returned to positive territory, marking a remarkable turnaround. But what I'm going to reveal next is perhaps the most interesting part. Ireland's export-driven recovery was supported by its deep integration into global supply chains and its ability to innovate and adapt to changing market dynamics. And what about Greece? I'm going to explain how they did all of this. But the big deal about it is that Greece's recovery efforts were marred by challenges that were both economic and political in nature. The government implemented austerity measures and structural reforms aimed at fiscal stability. But public opposition and social unrest made it difficult to enact these changes effectively. In other words, Greece faced an uphill battle in implementing reforms, and the reliance on international bailouts became a defining feature of its recovery. But wait, how did we get here? Greece's journey was complicated by structural inefficiencies, with bureaucracy and regulatory barriers hindering progress. And if you think that's troubling, wait until you hear this next part. Despite efforts to reform the economy, the pace of recovery remained slow, and economic growth only began to reemerge in the latter part of the decade. Greece's inability to diversify its economy limited its growth potential, making it difficult to achieve sustainable economic recovery. So, how did Ireland and Greece's economies chart their course between 2010 and 2020? And what surprising turns defined their past during this rowdy decade? Here's the thing. From 2010 to 2020, Ireland's GDP grew at an average annual rate of 5.3%, while per capita income increased steadily. Employment improved significantly, with unemployment falling to 5.7% by 2019. And if you think that's impressive, you should know that Ireland's robust export sector, particularly in tech and medicines, drove this impressive growth. The country's success was underpinned by its open and competitive business environment, which attracted investment and fostered innovation. In contrast, Greece's economic recovery was sluggish and fraught with challenges. And it gets worse. Greece's GDP contracted multiple times, with an average annual growth rate of merely 0.8%. The unemployment rate remained high, peaking at 27.5% in 2013 and staying above 16% until 2019. On top of this, investment levels were low and trade balances were hampered by structural inefficiencies. The Greek economy faced significant barriers to growth, including a rigid labor market and a lack of competitiveness in key sectors. But looking at the bigger picture, Ireland's economic performance has continued to shine in recent years. As of 2023, GDP growth reached 5.1%, driven by the evolving information tech, medication, and financial sectors. Ireland's ability to adapt to global trends and maintain a favorable business environment has allowed it to remain resilient in the face of external challenges. Key sectors such as technology grew from 35 billion euros in 2010 to approximately 105 billion euros in 2023, while pharmaceuticals expanded from 40 billion euros to nearly 120 billion euros over the same period. Meanwhile, Greece's economic recovery has gained some momentum, but challenges persist. GDP growth improved to around 2.8% in 2023, but unemployment is still above the EU average. The Greek government has made efforts to implement structural reforms, but the pace of change has been slow, and further progress is needed to address the underlying issues that continue to impede growth. Greece's key sectors like tourism, which accounted for 15 billion euros in 2010, have reached approximately 25 billion euros in 2023, while the shipping industry has maintained its position, with Greek-owned vessels representing about 21% of the global shipping fleet, contributing nearly 20 billion euros annually to the economy. Which leads us to the question, what factors fueled Ireland's remarkable recovery, propelling it to such unexpected heights? Truth is, Ireland's success can be attributed to a combination of strategic policies and a favorable business environment. Ireland's low corporate tax rates of 12.5% and business-friendly environment attracted multinational corporations, driving foreign direct investment, or FDI, that reached 102 billion euros in 2023. Fueling economic growth. But that's not the only fascinating part of it. As if that's not all, Ireland's efficient regulatory framework and ease of doing business ranked 24th globally by the World Bank, further bolstering its appeal to global companies. The country's commitment to maintaining competitive tax regime has been instrumental in attracting investment and fostering economic development. And here's the thing, investment in education and workforce development played a pivotal role in Ireland's success. The government prioritized education, ensuring a highly skilled workforce, with 55% of 25 to 34-year-olds holding tertiary degrees that could meet the demands of a rapidly evolving global economy. And, surprise, surprise, Ireland's emphasis on innovation and technology, with research and development spending at 1.5% of GDP, enabled it to capitalize on emerging trends and create a dynamic entrepreneurial ecosystem with over 3,500 tech startups. But why did Greece struggle so intensely to achieve sustained economic recovery and growth, despite the global efforts to stabilize its economy? Turns out that Greece's economic challenge were deeply rooted in structural weaknesses and inefficiencies. The country's bureaucracy and regulatory barriers, ranked 79th in the World Bank's ease of doing business, hindered business growth and stifled innovation. In fact, Greece faced significant challenges in implementing reforms that could address these issues and enhance competitiveness. The rigidity of the labor market, with youth unemployment at 24.2%, and the complexity of the regulatory environment were major obstacles to economic progress. You might be wondering, what about Greece's economic reliance on specific sectors? Think of it this way. Greece's economy was heavily dependent on tourism and shipping, sectors that were vulnerable to external shocks. Tourism and shipping together contributed to about 25% of GDP in 2023. The lack of diversification limited Greece's ability to withstand economic downturns and capitalize on new growth opportunities. But that's not the only worrying part about it. See, Greece's public debt, at around 171% of GDP, remained a significant challenge, constraining fiscal policy and limiting the government's ability to invest in critical areas. The government faced resistance from various stakeholders, making it difficult to enact changes that could address structural inefficiencies and improve economic resilience. So, what crucial lessons can we uncover from the dramatically contrasting paths of Ireland and Greece? And how can these insights reshape our understanding of economic resilience? Ireland and Greece's divergent experiences highlight the critical importance of strategic economic policies, governance, and adaptability in shaping economic outcomes. I think we can all agree that Ireland's ability to attract foreign investment, foster innovation, and maintain fiscal discipline played a pivotal role in its recovery and growth. Meanwhile, Greece's challenges were compounded by structural inefficiencies, a lack of competitiveness, and difficulties in implementing reforms. So, what does the future hold for these nations? For Ireland, the outlook remains promising, with a focus on maintaining competitiveness and managing external risks. Ireland's continued investment in education, innovation, and a favorable business environment will be key to sustaining growth. The nation's ability to adapt to global economic trends and leverage its strengths in medicines and tech, with exports worth 165 billion euros in 2023, positions it well for future success. For Greece, the future hinges on its ability to implement comprehensive reforms that enhance competitiveness and economic diversification. Greece can cultivate a more resilient economy by building on its strengths in tourism and shipping while expanding into new sectors like renewable energy, which has the potential to generate significant revenue. Efforts to improve governance, streamline regulations, and invest in education and infrastructure will be crucial for sustainable growth. But what I'm going to reveal next is perhaps the most interesting part. As both countries continue to navigate the complexities of the global economic landscape, their experiences are an eye-opener into the dynamics of true economic resilience. The journey ahead is promising for both nations as they strive to build resilient economies capable of thriving in an ever-changing world. But Ireland and Greece might need to learn from past mistakes and enhance their appetite for strategic foresight if they want to forge their paths towards enduring prosperity even faster. Let us know your personal thoughts in the comment section, and if you enjoyed watching this video, smash the like button and be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.